It's the archaeology and theology of Doctor Who Revived Series 13 with that rebel rabbi and Archaeodeath.
Archaeodeathlings! It's archaeology professor Howard Williams here, as usual, with my special guest for these Doctor Who discussions.
I'm Rabbi Hannah, that rebel rabbi.
How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you, Professor?
I'm all right. I've tried to get my fedora and my scarf intact with my Day of the Dead jacket, cheesy, on Halloween, because it's nowhere near Halloween. And, you know, why not?
I feel like we're very much rocking the appropriate gear for season 13's Doctor Who.
Yeah, so we're doing season 13. So this is the final season in the way the BBC has formatted it ahead of the 50th anniversary, regeneration process. So we're in 2022. This was a micro season in many ways. The final season of Jodie Whittaker, 6 episodes, and then 3 specials. Is that the way it was arranged?
3 specials, yeah. And then culminating in the regeneration into David Tennant.
And so we are exploring the archaeological and theological dimensions of the stories and the representations of time travel and other worlds and the human past. And I suppose we could head straight into it, but is there any opening points you would like to start with on this series? So
I think overall, this series, I would like to say, I always love the portrayals. The acting is always superb, in my opinion. Overall, I think that this is not a high note for me. And generally, I'm an avid, as you know, fan of Doctor Who, and I've gone through the ups and downs like every other fan of the writing being hit or miss. And overall, this one is more miss than hit, unfortunately. But we're going to get into it.
We've said that a number of times, though, but this is a new low, in my opinion. And I found myself doing this watch throughs with you, finding for the first time I'm not enjoying doing this, and it's just got to get better, because there's always individual episodes that are really powerful about the characters, if not great storylines, or there's great storylines. But I thought this was generally just such a dire watch. But I don't want to whine on about that. I want to focus on some of the really interesting representations of things. So I'm happy to just go through an episode by episode. So we'll have 9 sections. We'll go through the Halloween apocalypse, the War of the Sontarans, Once Upon Time, Village of the Angels, Survivors of the Flux, and The Vanquishers. They're the 6 episodes in the themed series on The Flux. And then we'll do Eve of the Daleks, Legend of the Sea Devils, and The Power of the Doctor. So should we start off with the first one? Obviously, the Halloween apocalypse. What were your takeaways from this?
So I kind of find it interesting. I like the introduction of the Lupari. So I got my notes here. I like the introduction of the Lupari. I love this kind of like the idea of it being that every man needs it, like canine companion, and we see that kind of canine companion in the Lupari, that they're
so these are space dogs basically that somehow are there to save the Earth as a massive fleet.
Yeah. And we get introduced to a new character, Dan, who has kind of joined the team along with Yaz. And as much as I really, this doesn't have a lot of theological implications in the Halloween apocalypse, at least not from my, in re-looking at my notes, this is the introduction of this flux. They don't really go into what the flux is. We just know that it involves the Sontarans. We see weeping angels. We kind of see this like convocation of all of these older enemies, the Cybermen, again with the Daleks, again with the Sontarans, and we learned that about this thing called the Division. But there isn't really a lot of theological implications that happen in this particular episode, at least nothing that really stuck out to me. Okay. There's more to me when we get into the later episodes than there is so much in Halloween Apocalypse. What about for you, Professor?
Well, I think this episode is the highlight of the second two main highlights of the series in terms of representations of our physical landscape and the human past, because this is focused on Liverpool, right? In previous episodes, we'd seen the South Yorkshire city of Sheffield featured in recent episodes. We're now moving to another great northern city with industrial heritage and global connections in peacetime and in war, Liverpool. And they try to showcase aspects of the heritage of Liverpool through the character of Dan and the location. So he is romantically interested in a employee of one of a series of major museums in Liverpool, but it's the Museum of Liverpool, which is in a striking pierhead location amongst the docks, and it was a museum opened somewhere around 15 years ago to showcase the story of Liverpool from prehistory through to a modern multicultural city. And along the way, you get the stories of the industry, the trade and commerce, the connections to the slave trade, but also the connections to famous sons and daughters of Liverpool, including pop stars, musicians, as well as actors, including two people who've played Doctor Who, namely Tom Baker and Paul McGann, are Liverpudlian. At least I think that's right.
Paul McGann, right?
Yeah, so they are Doctor Who gets featured in the museum, so that's the important thing. And you see Dan as a character who you think is a tour guide, and then you just realise he's just a bit of a loner weirdo who's turning up and talking to visitors to the museum because he's so proud of being Liverpudlian. This guy is beyond Scouse in the most annoying way, but he is he is. There is at least there's a good attempt to showcase the Museum of Liverpool and the pierhead, and the on the Mersey River, facing off against Birkenhead on the other side, the other great sort of part of this Merseyside industrial complex of the late 18th, 19th and early mid 20th centuries. It showcases that. So that's the first important thing. And there's two other things. The second thing that this episode does is showcase the Williamson Tunnels, which are a bizarre set of structures within Liverpool that were built in the 1820s as a kind of job creation scheme, partly philanthropy or benevolence, partly eccentricity, to create tunnels that didn't have any clear utility. And I'm simplifying massively here, but in this fictional version of Liverpool, they are part of an attempt. We only learn this actually near the end of the 6 episodes, and it's never fully or adequately or even enjoyably rationalized. But the kind of idea is that Williamson is building these tunnels with a sort of a cognizance of the need to protect Earth and to find subterranean dwellings, to live in subterranean dwellings because they fear the flux is coming. I think that's my sense of, but it's bitty, it's confused, but it's shoehorned. But unlike, at least they attempted to feature an important part of the 19th century heritage of Liverpool that you can visit into the TV show and the storyline. Does it work? Not really. Did you need it? Not at all. But it's important to recognise, is all I'm saying. And the third point is the representation of Liverpool in our era today. And as this is going to rapidly date, I hope, but you get represented the streets of the terraced houses of dock workers and working class people in Liverpool. Like any big northern British industrial city, you've got that old housing stock of the 19th century still in use. There's an overt representation to food bank Britain. Dan works at a food bank, and this shows, and you think, well, that's a standard thing. Food banks, everywhere's got food banks. No, up until around 2008, food bank use was a tiny fraction of UK life. After the 2008 financial crash, and under successive Conservative governments that we've only just finally shirked off, we have seen a vast increase in reliance of working families as well as people out of work on food banks. And so I like the fact, it's small as it may be, passing reference it is, that in terms of the representation of the streets of Liverpool, not just the heritage highlights, and in talking about, you know, people's reliance on charity and food bank networks. This does capture something about 21st century Britain. So there's the representation of the heritage of Liverpool through the Museum of Liverpool and the Williamson Tunnels, wrapped into the plot, and Food Bank Britain is shown. The other thing that I want to say about the representation of the past in this episode is the Lipari, who I think are just ridiculous as a concept and an idea, and I hate them with a vengeance, but unlike you, but they also have a weird stylized Roman style armor. So they're given a bit of an antique vibe with this kind of breastplate and various aspects to Cavernista, I think his name is, his armor, that allude to the ancient world in vague senses. So there's an allusion to the ancient world in the Lipari. I don't know why, but they are given the sense of being, given sort of some kind of old armor, and the representation of Liverpool, its heritage and its contemporary landscape, and the circumstances that northern cities find themselves in 2022. That's my summary reflections on the archaeology of the Halloween apocalypse.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you have those takes on it. I wish that there was more theological aspects. We see a lot of it in previous seasons,
we have seen
but
a lot of
this is not starting out very strong in terms of theological underpinnings.
Well, we know it's heading to a new origin myth for the Doctor, or new origin story for the Doctor, which is very pan-universal and is about the nature of the very character.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that.
Yes. Yeah, and so I enjoyed it, and yeah, I do like the Lipari because I do kind of like that notion that even throughout space and time, a man needs his dog almost, and it's signified as a genetic link that they don't even have a choice. That I know you don't like it, but you're not always right, and so
I am.
I'm going to say that is something that I really like about it. I do like Dan. I think he's kind of affable. He's meant to be this character that is supposed to be the everyman, almost a self-insert of, what it's like to be just
Joker.
the guy. Yeah, a little bit. So I do kind of like him, even if there are times I don't quite understand what he's saying, but, that's okay.
So
are you ready? Are you ready for the War of the Sontarans?
Let's do the War of the Sontarans. So the theme is that the flux is coming, and I must say I can't even synopsize the plots of these. I just let them wash over me because I don't even know. I've lost track of what's going on, to be honest. But there are historical representations. Of course, you go back to the siege of Sebastopol in the Crimean War, where the British and the French are supporting the Ottomans against those imperial Russians, and of course, hurrah for the British there. And of course, Mary Seacole is represented I
love that part. I love being introduced to Mary Seacole
and her hotel. And there's all sorts of things we can unpick about the representation of that. I'm not an expert in that, but that's interesting. And the old dynamic of a doctoress is a term used by Seacole about and how that is played in. So there's that aspect, which is fun, and that British, as usual, the Brits in battles in the 19th century, everyone is ridiculously hammy, sort of like as if they would literally stand a chance, and of course they don't, but they still go over the top type thing. I think that's getting a bit tired now as a representation of the British Army, which is many critical things you can say about the British Army, but they weren't, it's a bit of a cliche now about sort of the British in battle. We as in the British did lose a lot of battles, but we also won a lot of them, and we didn't do it by just going gung ho and going charge at the light brigade, charge at the cannons, or it doesn't all, there's lots that can be debunked there, but let's leave that aside. For the Half a League allusion to the charge of the light brigade poem by is made. But I mean, and I suppose in terms of the other historical representations, Liverpool Dock comes back in with the Sontarans parking their ships along it because they're invading through time is the idea, isn't they? And they're coming in the So I think that was interesting as well. That again, Liverpool gets featured prominently in its industrial heritage indirectly with the Sontaran ships there. And I suppose in terms of hopefully encouraging you to reflect the again this kind of religious dimension to time and the universe with the Temple of Atropos, the idea of a temple to control time that is being attacked with the Muri controlling it. I mean, none of this is properly, in my opinion, explained or introduced or even connected in. It just we seem to flit. But at least the idea is interesting, isn't it? And I wish we had a proper, more robust introduction before it immediately, moves on. I don't know, but I thought that was cool.
I did think that the Temple of the Atropos was interesting in this idea that this is like the center of where time resides and that time flows through. Obviously with Doctor Who, you have this understanding that like time is wibbly wobbly. But it seems that this wibbly wobbly sense of time is actually really flowing through these almost like idols in the Temple of Atropos that are standing there for all eternity, helping the flow of time be regulated and making sure that everything goes appropriately. And then we see how it's gone like all kits up because we see the Sontarans are now battling against the British rather than the French, with the French against the Ottomans. So the Sontarans have taken on the role that originally was another group, social group that was being attacked. I loved Mary Seacole. I love that they brought in a woman of color rather than highlighting, as we always get, we usually get to see Florence Nightingale, but rather than that, we see Mary Seacole. I love that.
Has Doctor Who done Florence before? I don't know if they did.
I don't remember Florence, but no, I don't remember Florence Nightingale.
Okay, but you're right. I agree.
And we do get introduced to a new character named Vinder. And I do like that this kind of lonely person, he's in the middle of the, coldest depths of space making these video journal entries about what got him there. We don't really know. There's just like bits in here about how he got sent to the outer reaches of space by himself. So I really enjoyed, although it is a confusing storyline. And it's setting up all of these threads that we hope are eventually going to come back together and reconnect. But when you're in the middle of it, you're kind of like, what is happening? Why are we set right in the middle of the story? Rather than giving us some sort of setup, it's not allowing the story really to play out in front of the viewership as much as it's just throwing it in our face and having faith that we are going to come along for the ride, much as we do through most of Doctor Who. I think the issue with this is it is asking a lot of the viewership because time after time we're asked to kind of come along for the ride, not always have everything explained to us and just say, well, not everything is going to be explained and that's just the way it goes. I think that the viewership want a better understanding of what is happening. Although I do love this idea of Temple of Time. It does kind of remind me, and to kind of deviate from Doctor Who for a moment, of the way Jean-Luc Picard talks about time in the Star Trek franchise, where he talks about time not being an enemy, but being a companion that kind of walks with you, through your life. And I think that's kind of what these idols, these people, these creatures are meant to almost convey, as these are the things that walk with you as you are going through time, which we'll kind of see a little bit later in a couple later episodes. And I find that interesting, especially in theology, because don't we all want a little more time, and we're always kind of like faced with our own time here left on Earth and what we're doing with it.
Just a practical a point of correction on the detail. The TARDIS wiki says that Florence Nightingale appears in a audio story for the Fourth Doctor, White Ghosts. Anyway, but no, doesn't appear in the TV show.
Okay, So I mean I like Vinder, by the way, the actor who plays Vinder. You also find him in Anne Rice's new updated show of Interview with the Vampire. He does play Louis. I love him there. I did not know he was British because his New Orleans, his like very thick Cajun accent was spot on. So when I first saw him, as you know, I was like, hey, I didn't even know he was British. You know, I've seen him in Interview with the Vampire.
Oh, I didn't know you were British until your accent slipped that one time.
I'm only a little bit British.
Just teasing.
I mean,
the
I
Rabbi's
am
not
through
British,
my
by the
dad's
way.
side. I am. My father of blessed memory was British.
Oh.
British, German, and Scottish.
Yeah, but a mixture of, as most people are, aren't they?
Yeah, I'm half colonized, half colonizer. So shall we go on to Once Upon a Time?
Let's.
Once
I
Upon
have very
Time.
few. I kind of lost the plot at this point, and already I phased out, so I have very few notes about this, other than it just becomes I don't even can't even again synopsize the plot. My only notes are that there is my only notes talk about the fact that the Liverpool's famous Catholic cathedral gets a brief reference as a backdrop to one of the Liverpool scenes, and there's a railway viaduct features I noticed. That was really desperate to find some kind of sort of heritage dimension that I could evoke as part of the, to bring up something positive. But other than that, for me it was just it was another just what's going on, where are we, what's going on. But there was at least, so I felt that there was something constructive in some of the backdrop scenes to Liverpool City, and one of the bombed out churches gets featured, bombed by the Luftwaffe I'm talking about. So there is I can't remember which one, but there is a husk of a historic church that they walk through, drinking coffees and being Scousers. So they've put an effort into trying to show more about the I'm just joking. There's more to the landscape context of Liverpool is featured. But in terms of the plot, I honestly couldn't tell you. I kind of just went, well, okay, right. There's all sorts of the Atropos stuff, and there's this weird. Did we ever find out who that guy is trying to infiltrate unit? I don't even know what happened with his snakes. I mean, it was all so confusing.
Yes,
and then of
the
course
serpent.
Tectuine and the revelation of the Doctor and her backstory
And the division and her backstory. Yeah. So for me, yeah, again, we see the temple, we see priests, we find out that at some point, and for some reason, this doctor doesn't remember, but I believe that part of the reason that this doctor doesn't remember is because those memories are held with the fugitive doctor who we meet in the visions of Ruth. Ruth being who we find out is the fugitive doctor and used to work with Pavanasta, this Lupari. They were partners at the division, and at some point were headed into the Atropos temple to save the priest. So it's starting to kind of like come together, but not really in any sense. We see that Vinder's place in it has to do with this serpent who then somehow infiltrates unit and is, killing people in very interesting ways. But it doesn't really come together for what his point or what his position is supposed to be in this plot line. Again, we just see like these we get introduced to Belle, who is searching for, as we find out, Vinder, because they are our partners. And really, we get then suddenly introduced to yet another weeping angel. Now, don't get me wrong. The weeping angels are probably some of my most favorite Doctor Who foes of all time. But I'm seeing this like reuse. We see the Daleks again, the Sontarans again, the Cybermen again, and now this use of weeping angels, which is going to be in a different way than we generally sing. But it does not really, and we don't really get an idea of what the swarm is and what their purpose is, other than destruction. Like that seems to be the narrative with a lot of these weekly bad guys, almost.
Well, it's just
so there's not a lot there for me.
Yeah. Okay. So should we just move on then? Village of the Angels.
I liked Village of the Angels personally. I thought Village of the Angels had a lot more theological underpinnings, especially because the place where, this burial ground, this monument is kind of like the honing point for all of these angels to kind of converge on, and I really
None of it
love
makes
that
sense,
part.
but it's a great idea.
Yeah,
So
and I love that what this generally is they show up in this village there in Metterton. And I had it written down. Hold on. Metterton
made
in
up village name. Cursed
1967.
village.
First village, yes. We see a former soldier who is now a professor who is conducting these kind of psychic experiments on Claire, who was sent back in time by the angel we see in the previous episode, and he's trying to do these kind of psychic experiments to find out what's going on in her head, as well as we see a child kind of go missing. The doctor and companions show up to this village to kind of find out what's happening, only to find out that the universe is slowly being eroded away. And Yaz, Dan, and Professor Jericho, along with this little girl, get thrown back to 1901, where 1967 town understands that 1901 was this time where all of these people, the entire town went missing.
Yeah.
So, it is considered a cursed town, but basically they were all just thrown back to 1901. But in 1901, we see the edge of the earth almost being like a drop off. Like if you were a flat earther, this would be your Super Bowl, because you're seeing an actual kind of edge of the earth starting to disintegrate. And then we find that there's rogue angel that was maybe sent. I mean, I loved watching the angels kind of come out of this monument, this burial monument. And I found that to be really visually interesting, although I'm not exactly sure why they used that monument. Maybe you don't know either.
I mean, again, they're in South Wales. They've got some wonderful historic landscapes to utilise. So there's two funerary aspects here. I've given my funerary archaeology links. Firstly, their choice to film in the churchyard. I've just looked it up on movie maps. It was St Hilary's, Cowbridge. Cowbridge is a small town, formerly a Roman station, actually, if I recall correctly, in the Vale of Glamorgan. And its church, St Hilary's, has a pretty standard arrangement of 19th century graves. But in the TV show, in the Doctor Who episode, the idea is, I've counted the gravestones, there are 92, but then it finds a 93rd, and of course the 93rd is the angel. So it's a great, again, as a filming a moment, as a horror, angels horror, the angels finally making it into yet another cemetery, but this one it's supposed to be an English Devonian churchyard, but it's in Wales, so there's a bit of English washing of the Welsh landscape, which we could rant about, but let's skip over that. Like parts of South Wales are also Sheffield, it's happened a lot here, but then they have represented Wales as Wales quite a lot, so I suppose we could just be generous there if you wanted to, so the first historic location is St Hilary's, Cowbridge, and then the second one is a Neolithic chamber tomb of the Cotswold 7 variety known as Tinkinswood, which is also in a chamber tomb in the Vale of Glamorgan, and it's a Caddo managed site. It was excavated in 1914. So quite accurately, in general terms, when it's referenced in the TV show as being excavated in 1901, but instead it appeared in 1901, does sort of chime with the idea of a monument that was explored at that time, but was actually came into being at that time. So it's quite an eerie idea. But again, I don't understand what actually happened, and I don't understand why it had to be there. And so it was great. It's like it's almost like they're trying to shoehorn, as I said before. We want to be cool to film at a Neolithic tomb. Let's make that happen. So I can't really celebrate or reflect on any actual meaningful use of this, other than it's obviously a prehistoric monument. So it's somewhere in the region of 5,500 years old. It's cool. It's lovely to see it there, but honestly, I don't really get, I don't really grasp a sense of what it achieved.
Right, and we're still seeing this, like we're seeing this is where we're introduced to the passenger, which is like some sort of like prison in the shape of some kind of humanoid figure that can like keep all of these prisoners. It's weird. I mean, like, well, quite frankly, I feel like Village of the Angels, while it is interesting because it does have some interesting takes, it also just does, it leaves more questions than it does answers. We have this rogue angel that
It's a rogue angel, we should have said, yeah.
takes over the doctor, and the final scene is kind of the doctor being turned into this weeping angel. You see her hands becoming, we know that Claire is got like the visions of an angel inside of her, so she's starting to turn into an angel, but they don't really make sense of it during this episode, not for my likings anyway.
No. Okay, so shall we move on to Survivors of the Flux?
Survivors of the Flux, yeah. I mean, might as well.
So would you like to start off with that one, or shall I?
No, if you don't mind. So this is where we find out more about the division, of course, and the division being the like entity, this overarching, like the Doctor Who equivalent of, I guess, scepter, of some kind of evil organization almost, that is trying to decide what universes survive and what universes don't survive. And at the heart of it is Tectuan, the mother that originally found the Doctor being the first kind of Gallifreyan, the first Time Lord. This is what, when you were talking about earlier, how we find this origin story being retconned and rebuilt from scratch, of the Doctor's origin being that she was a foundling that Tectuan found and did experiments on, and then used her genetic material to kind of create Gallifrey. And she is literally at the heart of this division, and created this entire organization to really be the arbiters of who lives and dies, what universes survive. And in the middle of that, then we see Dan, Yaz, and now Professor Jericho, who have to live through life from 1901. There's no going back. There's no angels to transport them. And they're trying to find ways to, of course, using 1901 technology to find the Doctor. And I do like that this is sort of where we start to get a kind of a glimpse of Yaz's attachment to the Doctor. We see a couple of glimpses here and there, and for all of the ways that Dan is kind of portrayed as lumbering and kind of the comic relief, he notices that. He seems to be the one who has noticed a little bit of her desire and her drive to meet back up with the Doctor and really, figure out what's going on. So it's an interesting episode to me. I did like kind of the backdrops that we get to see, the historical backdrops we get to see. We do, of course, get to see Kate Stewart again, which, I always loved Kate Stewart. But there's not a lot of theological, things I can go into in terms of this episode.
You get an ood in here, though.
We do get one ood. We do get one ood who, and we get this idea of the Doctor being kind of put in a position of she has to decide. And we see the fob, that has her locked up memories from her time in the division, and she's kind of, presented with these choices.
I mean, again, it's rather incidental to the plot that looks like it's just been spewed onto page without any editing or any, and then because of some perverse deference for the screenwriter, people just seem to have run with it, regardless of how much garbage it is. At least it takes you on a global journey in the first decade of the 20th century. At least you get to see the tomb robbing cliche. The Aztecs, whose tomb is invaded by the TARDIS with the first Doctor, are brought back with the death trap cliche, which of course is a myth, that these tombs are not full of, spears that come out of the walls and pressure pads. This is all Indiana Jones, but at least you've got that long filmic tradition of tombs as death traps cliches, which is most recently critiqued in, I think, season 4 of Rick and Morty, where they just barge in because they've got sort of invisible protective shields on. They just walk in with all these daggers bouncing off them and spears and rolling boulders bouncing off, and they just get to a tomb. What a stupid idea, says Rick, sort of to leave treasures in a tomb or something. I can't remember the exact line, but it's really good. I'm going to need to do a blog post about that as a separate thing, sort of a little cameo moment for the whole. And then then finally the inhabitant of the tomb comes back as a mummy, but then gets crushed by the very death traps that are there to try and stop them. Anyway, but my point is, this is so embedded in our popular culture that tombs are full of, I just thought that's incidental, really. We get the Great Wall of China, Tibet gets featured with some attempt at humour, and then we learn that the Williamson Tunnels back in Liverpool were created in the city to save humanity, which doesn't make any sense, but hey ho, what can you do?
Yeah, exactly. We find ourselves back in the Williamson's tunnels, which is interesting, and I find that kind of an interesting plot point, but it doesn't. It just seems like a lot of threads that they're pulling on and unraveling that don't really come together, even in the final episode before we go into the specials.
Yeah.
It doesn't really ever.
Yeah, where did all this lead to? This mash
sense.
of ideas. I mean, I can't even. Again, it's just silly, isn't it? So what do I have about episode 6? The fob watch as the focus of memories, and the fact that the Doctor makes the decision not to re-access those memories, but to put them into eternal safekeeping in the TARDIS, to keep it safe where she can't find it, is a comforting idea that it's not out there in the universe, but it is within the TARDIS, but lost forever, but not. So I love that idea that the TARDIS is, by its very nature, as a time machine and a personality and an agent, is like a guardian angel to the Doctor, and also a keeper of her secrets. So I like that idea, and I thought that was good. Beyond that, though, I got nothing out of this episode of archaeological reflection, really, to be honest with you.
For me, it's just an interesting take to me, just on the way perseverance is, if we want to think about the way, the humans involved, Vinder, and the woman who is kind of kidnapped and put in passenger, is figured out a way to utilize their time to get back out of passenger, and then how to use passenger as sort of to help the Doctor in their end pursuits. This idea of the split between the 3 Doctors, I mean, we could see it as kind of a small reference to this idea of Trinity, because she's in 3 different places at once, but Phil is herself. I think that's kind of loose. It's not really something that we can really point to in terms of this idea of the being in 3 places at once. And quite frankly, this was a real big letdown for the end of a season. It doesn't really wrap us. It doesn't tell us who the Swarm really were, what their real purpose was besides destruction. She ends up getting this choice that she makes, and it was a kind of a disappointing end. And I would like to say also, again, it's nothing to do at all with the portrayals. The acting is superb.
No,
they
fine.
know their characters. They know what they're doing. The writing is shit.
Well, I want to say, I'm sorry. I don't think it's as simple as that, though, because how can you mess this up? Well, you've got a production, you've got a formula, you've got a successful running series, you've got a fan base that's so wide. I know different fans want different things, but even as someone who calls himself at least a fan in lightly, it's just why can't you just have basic, simple plots without all this silliness? And I think half of it is they've got a fan base that's so aged now and diverse, and that's a good thing, that they are trying to make it as confusing as possible just to give people things to speculate about on social media. Who is this person? What is it? Well, let's have one mystery. Let's have one mystery character or plot line that dances around, right? And then get on with a crack on with an adventure set in a village where there's an angel trying to escape. That's enough. Let's have an episode where there's a temple of time and that's trying to be disrupted. That's a bleeding enough, right? Can we just? Why does it have to be that like it's written for an ADHD? I said it looked like it was crowd written by fan fiction ADHD teenagers. I mean, it's we have no disrespect for people with ADHD, of which I know many, but honestly, but it looks like it's crowdsourced snippets, like of a plots. And I don't think you could, if this is, it's almost like it's AI generated. Perhaps that's a less mean way of saying it. It looks like an AI generated nonsense plot that doesn't quite ever get anywhere. But I would say this episode does again feature the Museum of Liverpool and the Liverpool cityscape briefly, and the Williamson Tunnels as an element. So at least that is that. But beyond that, please just let it go away and let's focus on the final three, shall we? Specials. Something else
I mean, we have Eve of the Daleks, which, as we know, is kind of a Christmas special, unlike some of the other ones we've seen before. This one does, but this one revolves around New Year's Eve. The TARDIS has gone through so much stuff, it has to reset. And in that reset, we kind of get put into this time loop.
At least it's a self-contained plot. At least it doesn't have any.
It was not a bad
I didn't enjoy it particularly, but at least it had an integrity,
I liked this one. I thought it was very cute. It wasn't meant to be too highbrow. It was just meant to be like, and this is where we start to peel back more layers about, Dan picks up on it and it's like, how come you haven't just told the doctor how you feel? Now, one could say this is a little bit of queer baiting because Yaz, doesn't really talk about it. It's kind of alluded to that Yaz is yet another companion who has fallen for the doctor and is, has romantic feelings for the doctor, but we don't really ever get to any kind of straightforward confessions or straightforward talk about it. It's just kind of an illusion.
Could you explain?
That we know,
I know you've done it previously, but could you explain for viewers what you mean by queer baiting?
So queer baiting is where you take a character and you give the illusion that this character could be a member of the queer community, but you never really allow that character to develop into a truly queer character. So you're like, hey, here's some crumbs to bring in our queer audience to show you that we're not just heteronormative. Don't really ever get to see it. Now, we have seen queer characters before in Doctor Who, so this was a little bit of a letdown for me in terms of seeing that it's almost illusion, not really. We don't really get any concrete definitions for it. And I mean, one could say, well, that's okay because not everybody is comfortable talking about it. And that's absolutely true too. But I just think that it was weird to kind of throw this into the mix at the end run of Jodie Whittaker's, at the end of her run as the Doctor. I enjoyed it. The time loop was kind of interesting to me. Of course, I've always liked that, Groundhog's Day kind of thing. So it was an interesting, again, Daleks, because why not? But it's really the last two that I find more interesting. The Legend of the Sea Devils, I find way more interesting, as well as The Power of the Doctor than I did Eve of the Daleks.
Well, I just wanted to quickly, before we leave that episode, say that in terms of contemporary material culture and landscapes, the concept of a storage facility, even though this is particularly ridiculous that she's got no clients or hardly any clients, and it doesn't make sense. But the idea of old buildings that have secondary uses or tertiary uses or later uses as storage facilities is now such a widespread part of the British landscape that I think it just serves it captures a moment now, not necessarily of our just a couple of years, but of a trend of storage lockup facilities. I mean, this is nothing new, but it fits into a reflection on our contemporary landscape. You wouldn't have seen a plot like this in 1978 or 1998, I don't think. So I think again, it's nothing radical. I just thought it's important to observe how Doctor Who is serving as a document of our world, as well as representations of fictional, futuristic and past environments. So I thought I'd just point that out. But let's indeed move forward to the early 19th century Chinese landscape, which is a good fun turtles,
sea turtles, like
mutants and
pirate
mutant
turtles.
non-ninja sea turtles.
Yes, it was such an interesting plot to me. And in this way, we do see kind of a sense of honor and how honor, especially among Asian culture, can be seen as almost a religious subset. This idea of honoring one's lineage, honoring one's legacy, honoring what the duty is to, we see a family that is honor bound to protect the statue, and
That's true.
the way that that plays out. Because that's really what it's getting down to, is the way this plays out is this young man who is then trying to seek vengeance for the death of his father. And in that way, it is also sort of a almost religious subtext of the eye for an eye, the kind of tooth for a tooth that we're seeing against the Asian landscape that is happening here. And plus, I just liked Turtle Pirates, and almost like a ripoff of the Kraken. It's an absurd plot, but it's fun. It's an absurd plot, but it was fun for me.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the main, I mean, apart from being a historic setting with a historic character of Queen Madame Chang, and that's, at least they don't have a European. They take it outside of Europe for once, right? So I suppose that's something. Or just exotic journeys to other parts of the world in a colonial style or a colonial era style. So that's good, right? The idea of a statue which is chained down this. I mean, I don't really understand. Again, I don't really end up. I left it wondering, well, why and how and what. But anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, I love the idea of a statue that's sitting there being guarded by a family, and that it actually, the sea devil is trapped inside this statue. So I just love the idea of a fishing village or whatever the heck it is has this stupid, scary statue that they're protecting. I just love that as a theme. And yeah, the ships and the flying ship that we don't even, why did they do that? Even say in the plot, well, why do you need to do that? And they go, well, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I love the idea, and that's all I have to say about it. It's good to have a historic setting and a statue as a focus of that seems to be commemorating some kind of terrible monster that actually becomes a terrible monster. Yes.
I mean, the only other thing about this that I would like to touch on is that Yaz and the Doctor do kind of talk about their mutual affection, but they do it in these kind of broad terms. We see the Doctor say things like, if it was going to be anybody, it would be you, kind of alludes to the fact, brings up the fact that he was at one point had a wife. We know that, of course, that is River Song. And it also highlights the Doctor, because she says, "Oh, I didn't know you were married once before." Like,
sorry,
I don't know.
Could we stop there, please, Rabbi? Because you completely broke up. Can we just count you in, and I'll edit this bit here? So 1, 2, 3, go.
So we see that Yaz and the Doctor are talking a little bit more about their feelings here.
Yes.
Yaz finds out things about her she didn't know, and she's kind of being revealed that she doesn't know as much about the Doctor as she thinks she does. Yeah. It was revealed that, of course, the Doctor was married to River Song, and Doctor says things like, if it was anybody, it would be you, but these are still illusions. If it'd be anybody, it'd be you, and eventually I have to leave, and all the sad kind of things we hear from the Doctor before, it's just kind of being recycled for this conversation, which does not really have a lot of meat to it, in my opinion.
Okay, so where are we now? We're moving on to the final episode, aren't we?
On the power of the Doctor, I actually really liked a lot. If you'd like to introduce this one, Professor.
Okay, so here we have again a plot that I struggle to find a grasp and a connection to, but the master is Rasputin, the Time Lord. The cyber masters, the sort of mashup of Time Lord and Cybermen are in league with him. the Daleks are involved. I mean, and they're trying to control this mystery child's energy source. I mean, I just going, what the heck is going on? But the great thing about it again is that you get cameos from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the past Doctors. A CGI'd William Hartnell. It's not William Hartnell, but it's not even the actor who played the replacement of William Hartnell, is it? Because he passed away as well, or was it him? Was this before he passed away? But anyway,
no, it is. It's the guy. It's the gentleman who played Filch in the Harry Potter series.
Oh, it is him. It is him again. So there's continuity there. Then you got Peter Davidson, Paul McGann, Colin Baker, and have I missed someone?
And Sylvester McCoy.
And Sylvester McCoy, of course. You know, so that's lovely in itself. And you've got Ace and you've got Tegan as two old assistants back. And again, I couldn't even tell you what the plot was about, other than there was explosions, there was action, and the Doctor wins in the end of the day. And I didn't see any particular archaeological themes, and I thought it was all rather contrived. But I think hopefully Chibnall's not doing any more of these stuff. He's gone now, is he? So hopefully
I believe so.
Did they? I mean, they probably didn't sack him but you know.
No, but I don't think he's going to be writing for the next series. But I will say to you, I disagree with you. I thought this was an interesting plot because it highlights the goal of the Master, at least this iteration of the Master, which I loved. I loved this iteration of the Master, is jealousy. I want to be the Doctor. You know, he's used the dead of Gallifrey to create these Cybermen that will regenerate. He then creates this machine to literally force a regeneration onto the Doctor because he wants to have that feeling that the Doctor has. He has these companions that love him. He has this life that has been kind of denied to the Doctor. That's what I see. And so he has this forced regeneration that occurs, and some of the cheeky moments are him coming out dressed in a lot of the kind of mismatched outfits of previous Doctors. Yes, Tom Baker's scar, Sylvester McCoy. I thought that was very interesting. I do really like that we see how the Doctor kind of reacts to and the way that the companions react to this, and including this idea that Ace and I love that Ace and Tegan are back. I love that they get these kind of closure moments with their respective doctors through this kind of hologram program that the Doctor has set up. But they get to have these moments with their doctors because they say, you leave, we don't hear from you again. So I did love that part. Of course, I loved that at the end of this episode, we see that the companions have gotten together and kind of created a space for themselves because they can't tell the world what they know.
Like Alcoholics Anonymous,
it's like the companions. And quite frankly, I loved the regen into David Tennant. I will not lie. Yes, it was a lot of fan service in this episode, but I loved the fan service. I love an opportunity to see older Doctors kind of come together and get to participate in these newer Doctors. And if anything, I think that space that the Doctor enters because of the forced regen, where she encounters older versions of herself, is relatively kind of a space that has been talked about before, and we could connect to kind of theological ideas of the way station. Are you deciding to go on to the next life? Are you deciding to go on, or are you going to try and fight and stay and succeed in this life and go back?
So the spiritual space kind of where the different generations come in. Sorry, go on.
No, that's exactly it. What you're saying is right.
The choice of location for the regeneration deserves note, of course, because this is one of Britain's most famous natural landmarks. This is Durdle Door in Lulworth Cove on the Jurassic coast of Dorset, and a very striking choice of location to therefore have the TARDIS and the Doctor outside the TARDIS rather than inside the TARDIS, having the regeneration moment, and then gets confused by the familiarity of the teeth of of David Tennant's Cat Doctor as he emerges, and we haven't got an explanation of why. For the first time, the Doctor has revisited an old face, something that we've had allusions to before.
Yes, I did like that. It did kind of throw back to a couple places. First, it threw back to David Tennant's original entrance, where he's like new teeth, and he's in that. So he said,
"Making me do it now."
I know these teeth. I know these teeth. So I like that. I do like that it does throw back to when Matt Smith is talking to Tom Baker, and as the keeper of this area, and he's like, you might revisit some of the old faces now and again. So I like that they threw back to that. We don't have an understanding of why it's David Tennant. Even David Tennant's version of the Doctor doesn't understand, because he's just like looking himself over and is like, what? And that's where we end. It's like, him, what? And for me, the best part of Whittaker's regen is she acknowledges, I want to see what's next, but kind of in those last moments, let's go, and says, tag, you're it.
And I think, so yes, obviously every regeneration, as we keep saying, I don't want to repeat myself, is about death and reflections on death and the sorrow and regret and the anxiety. Even someone who's basically an immortal still feels those, that we all feel, the regrets and the remorse and the loss for themselves and for those they love, knowing that their life coming to an end will have impact. So, but we see it alone. It's important to say that she wants this change to happen alone, and there's that privacy and that isolation with regeneration, which is sad, and as well. So I suppose that's nothing new, but I think sometimes we have to repeat ourselves in this long sequence of discussions. I don't know how much these discussions will be of use to those who haven't seen the episodes, and how much for real fans who want to go into the minutiae of the plot lines they're useful. But I think we are trying to, through these videos, bring our perspectives to a very popular TV show from academic angles that I think are really important. They show the importance of heritage, of conceptions of time and material culture, of sacrality and mortality versus immortality. There's so many themes that blend in, even in the most trashiest of writings and the most confusing of plot lines and the most pretentious, because I think it's pretentious to leave such plot lines, for me, such stories that are so messy. I think it shows an arrogance and a indulgence that I think is it's difficult to find in any other fan-based show. I don't think Star Trek, well, actually, Star Trek Discovery is very much of a similar ilk. We're living in a time where the fan bases of these major franchises are getting to the point where it doesn't matter anymore. Let's just invent a spore drive. Let's just do, honestly, it doesn't. It's great actors, great individual ideas, but I mean, let's just not bother. We'll just say anything. What can we do to really just completely make the biggest possible disconnections with the existing canon? Let's just and I'm really disheartened when I've heard some rumours about the forthcoming Star Wars Ahsoka 2 series is putting the characters in that. I've heard rumour. I've just watched the Clone Wars, and some of the worst episodes in that they're using as inspiration for the baddies. It's just like, I know that fans like this stuff, but honestly, you literally sort of force immortals type characters living on this stupid planet. No one's going to drag that in. That was kind of a bad idea. We'll never see that coming back. Oh, there it is again. It's like they can't help themselves, these long-running shows. They think, well, the fans will like it. The fans will like it. The same dullards who liked it 15 years ago, and everyone said it was trash. So I think often these shows do try to serve a fan base, but I think that in doing so, I think
they don't trust the fan base. Like you said, the fans will like it. But I don't think they necessarily trust the fan base that they could entrust us with creative things that don't necessarily always have to lean into fan service.
No, that's I think trust the fans to follow the show in innovative directions rather than constantly, we've got to have the Daleks back. We've got to have
Yes. That's what I'm hoping for in David Tennant. I know his run is just to highlight the 50th anniversary before we get into Nchuti Gatwa, but I'm hoping that we see less of these recycled baddies and we get some better, like we get new innovations, we get new plots, we get us going to places. It's all supposed to be all time and space. So let's see all time and space and not constantly be thrown back in with the weeping angels and the Daleks and the Cybermen. Can we encounter new things, new plot lines? And I'm hoping to see some new creativity in that way. Don't get me wrong, I'm looking forward to seeing David Tennant again because David Tennant, but equally I want to know that the reason they brought David Tennant is because I have good ideas and that going forward it's going to give us an explanation of why, what is his purpose, and then I'm looking forward to Nchudi Gatwa's run as the Doctor, which by the way we know is the first black man to ever play the Doctor, as well as the first out gay man to ever play the Doctor. So this is going to be an interesting run.
I mean, I presume when you say that, and I presume they are actually going to. I mean, they don't have to because gay men are versatile actors just like anybody else. But I presume they're going to. I presume that there is an angle to explore the sexuality of the Doctor in that regard. I'm not going to say I hope they make him really gay, but I presume my point is we haven't watched it yet. We're years behind, but sharing our anticipation in 2024 for something that aired a year and a bit ago. I really hope they don't just have another gay actor playing as good a straight person. At least
I hope it's so gay that it makes people uncomfortable. I'm going to be real with you.
But the Jodie Whittaker woman, she was affable, motherly, in a bit of or older sisterly, perhaps more, but there was not a sexual aspect to her. She was a very asexual person in the same way that I would say that most doctors are, but I would say there is at least some chemistry with some of the more recent, actually even Tom Baker at moments but even particularly the more recent ones and Davidson, the youngest Doctor in many ways, when he was the youngest Doctor, wasn't he, until Matt Smith.
Until Matt Smith, yeah.
I can't remember the date, but my point is that there's at least some kind of heterosexuality there, but I hope they don't make it
I want
sex neutral. I'm not saying it should be a hardcore, gay fest of.
Honestly, I want to see Nchudi Gatwa be so queer that straight men question themselves. Like because we've seen the heteronormativity through the seasons. We've seen it. We've seen only illusions. We see Jack Harkness. Of course, he sleep with anything that would allow him to, and we see that there is some flirtation between Jack and David's Doctor, even a little bit between him and Christopher Eccleston's Doctor. So I really hope that Nchudi Gatwa comes in and makes people uncomfortable, and that we get to highlight, hey, the Doctor has been all of these things, and to pigeonhole this idea of the Doctor's sexuality into what is going to make one set of fan base comfortable. Like sometimes you need to be made uncomfortable. And the only thing I do know is that Jonathan Groff is in at least one episode. And Jonathan Groff is also a very well-known gay actor. So I'm kind of like, maybe.
Well, the thing is, this is supposed to be a kids or older kids TV show. So we're not talking about sexuality in the sense of anything.
Oh, no, nothing salacious.
But we're talking about equality in the sense of if it's okay to represent those subtle romantic heterosexual relationships, then surely parity, equality, equity. I don't know how all those terms apply in a fictional context, but at least some kind of connection or similarity of. Is that what we're talking about here? Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I don't expect it to be salacious, but if we can watch Matt Smith kiss River Song, and we can see these.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Yeah.
That's what I mean. That kind of, and I know it's going to make some people uncomfortable if this happens. Haven't seen it, so don't know. It might make people uncomfortable, But
The only other thing that made me uncomfortable if Daleks and Cybermen started being amorous towards each other or something weird like this, you know.
So that's it. I mean, that's it. The next
I don't want any
is,
metal on metal.
especially not if they don't have oil. That seems like that might hurt.
What are we saying? Let's not go there. No.
I will just say that I think that I'm looking forward to David Tennant. I'm looking forward to Nichuri Gatwa.
Yeah.
And I really hope it's been better than the writing. I loved Jodie Whittaker. I loved the companions. The writing could have been so much better. We deserved a lot better in terms of the writing.
You know what? For me as an archaeologist, if there's no good writing, there's no good acting. There's at least let's get some good historic monuments and museums and as backdrops.
Exactly. So, so that's it for, I think, for us for season 13, and we'll be back, I guess, for the next.
We'll be back, but thank you so much, Rabbi, and I hope this is of use to audiences, even if you disagree with everything we've said and think, well, you obviously, and for fans, you don't have this, fine, but at least it's hopefully adds something to the conversation about the way in which we can, there are planned and deliberate and also incidental but important dimensions to these fictional shows that I think touch people and relate to people and their engagement with their understanding of the universe, of religion, and the story of who we are in different ways. So thank you, everybody.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I guess we'll see you in space and time.
We will.
If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to Howard Williams on YouTube. In addition, consider following the Archaeodeath WordPress blog at howardwilliamsblog.wordpress.com.